Hello and welcome. I'm very excited to have you with us today for a really interesting topic for today's webinar. We all know that the handoff between your sales team and your customer success team can make or break your relationship with the customer. It also sets the stage for retention down the road. And when done correctly, it can result in an excited customer who's ready to get tons of value out of your product and maximize the solution with confidence. But when done poorly, we know that the customer can be left confused about next steps. A poor handover or handoff leaves your customer lacking the support and structure they need to realize your product's full value. We all know this, but how do we solve for it? In today's webinar, we're going to hear from myself, Darren Chatham, co-founder and head of growth at Hugo. We have Britt Morgan, an account executive at Hugo, who runs our sales team, and Asher, who heads up customer engagement and customer success for the team. So a few great voices who do this stuff day in, day out. So what we're going to chat about today to help you solve this problem is firstly why the handoff from sales to customer success is so important. A ton of tips and tricks to implement a much better handoff process that you can walk away with today, and how Hugo can help you in that successful handoff as part of your SaaS tech stack. Might hand over to Britt at this point to talk about why the handoff is so important.
Thank you, Darren. So in the world of SaaS, customers have so many choices and the power to choose many different options. And so we really have to be really diligent around creating value early on. And we do this by introducing the CSM early on in the deal cycle and creating that relationship that adds value over a longer period of time, right? Because sometimes when we're closing deals, we close a small fraction of a deal that might expand to a larger one later. And so it's incredibly important, not just for the customer success role, but also for sales, as we see that happening. The handoff from sales to CS is incredibly important to retain those lifelong relationships between the customer and the company, and also for expansion. Like if we're working with a product-led growth company here at Hugo, and so when we're handing off that deal to CS, like that's an incredibly important moment, right? We have to get it completely right, and we have to create value from the get-go. And it's a really important process. And if you get it wrong, right, you can have churn and lose a much bigger deal down the line as we expand into some of those companies.
I think also, Britt, we talked a little bit about this last week, I think, but like from a sales perspective, also thinking about enablement and not just closing the deal, right? And so having the sales team also have a bit of an enablement role during the sales cycle. So you're able to not just go from sell, and here's like the onboarding and enablement. It's actually part of the process. And so you're getting customers in the door that are better fits. They're already looking to grow and expand, and they're getting a lot of value from the product in the early stages as part of your sales cycle, and not just like this afterthought. So I think that's like an interesting thing as well.
It's a sort of real relationship. Like as a customer, nothing annoys me more when you've finally got this relationship with an account executive, the deal's ready to close, you're spending a lot of money in many cases, and then as soon as you sign the contract, you hit that DocuSign, like see you later, you're over there, Asher or someone on the success team. I'm like, dude, we've been hanging out for 3 months trying to, show me the value of this product and get it over the line, and you've flicked me over. So having success involved during the sales process makes it feel like a much more genuine, organic handover, right? Because I already know my customer success manager. They've already been a part of it. They're not just this new kid on the block the day the deal's signed.
Yeah. And also that sales is adding extra value. It's not just negotiation and contracts and the best deal possible, but it's actually adding, how can we help you? How can we improve your time to value and things like that? So it's like pretty interesting and key.
Yeah, it's no more golf courses and country clubs, right? It's like, that's how can we actually add value to what your pain is? And I think that sales has changed tremendously since I've been in this career, and it's actually fun to see the change. And I think CS has a big part of that, right? Like, and exactly what you said, Asher, like creating that bridge early on, and or maybe Darren, you mentioned it, where you're creating that relationship between the CS person and the client, like right off the bat, so they can get a sense of who they're dealing with down the line, and they're not like, I had this great relationship with my account executive early on, and now she won't answer my call because she's working on closing other deals, right? They already know Osher. They get the sense of what to expect and adding value right from the beginning.
Yeah. Also, one thing, we talk about customer experience, but I also think we should touch on team experience or internal experience. What's interesting as well about like traditional models or broken models is that it can create some tension internally. The salesperson can then, close a deal, hand it off to success, and the information might not necessarily, all the information might not necessarily be there, right? And then it's a bad handoff and a bad kickoff, and success is blaming sales and etc. And so like it can be kind of interesting when you start to build a more hybrid model or be more thoughtful about the handoff process and the onboarding process, is it can actually improve some of that internal challenges or reduce some of that tension, dissolve some of the silos there that you see like with historical or traditional approaches. So I think like we think of it in two buckets, like customer experience and then also like internal experience as well.
One thing that I've seen happen out there, which has been really great, is to think about sales and success as having the exact same job, but what makes them different focuses on different parts of the pipeline. So sales is focused on the top end of the pipeline, success is focused on the next stage in the pipeline. Really, what they're doing is trying to create customer value, which is measured in revenue in many cases for many businesses. But moving away from this idea of sales is for closing deals, customer success is for keeping them, because that then drives that behavior of the tick and flick, right? Where my deal's closed, that's how I'm incentivized, that's how I'm motivated as a salesperson. I'm out, and success, not wanting to spend any time until we have a live customer to retain. So think about incentives. I think that's one way that can be done quite easily. Maybe it's moving away from a very traditional commission model, looking at kick like certain kickers and things like that for retention, or delaying when sales folks earn their commission, but bringing the success incentives earlier on. The traditional sales up here and success down there, I don't think it works in modern SaaS, particularly when customers have the flexibility to choose something else next month or next year. It's no longer those big multi-year contracts.
Yeah, I think some tactics and maybe going a level down, just some tactics that I've seen teams do and some of the things that we implement as well. What I find one tactic that's interesting, as you said, about bringing the timelines closer down, is introducing CS earlier in the sales cycle and not just an after sort of close one thought. And it can take a lot of different forms. I've seen it in different ways. One of them, for example, is to be involved in some of the later stage meetings. Maybe it's to discuss the customer success roadmap. What is the team going to do for this business? How are we going to support you over the next 30, 60, 90 days, for example, or going into a 2-year contract? Like, what does that relationship look like? So that's kind of interesting, Britt. We've done this as well. I've joined some of your conversations to talk a little bit about how CS is going to be supporting the team moving forward, and it has a lot of interesting benefits. One from a process perspective, but also from an experience perspective, as we talked about. It makes the customer feel it feels more seamless, that process, less of a stage and more of like a continual relationship. And also, as we talked about, it reduces some of those silos. So when you have a big CS team and a big sales team, a lot of that information and handoffs and things like that can get kind of siloed. And so having that alignment together reduces that. Also, what I've seen, it's a little nugget as well. Sometimes that call with success and sales together with the prospect actually creates an opportunity to align on some of the goals and challenges. And sometimes things can come up, which is kind of interesting, like something that we may not have spotted earlier, or a new development that the prospect is talking about. And so it creates an additional opportunity to provide value and align on how we can support the team going forward. Yeah.
You reminded me, actually, talking about silos. One of the things that's worked really well for us as a business as we've scaled out our sales and success functions is this idea of continuous handover. Instead of closing a deal, and even if you've got the best checklists and agendas and process for handing things over, rather thinking about how we can have that going through the whole deal cycle. So for us, we share meeting notes via our Slack integration. So as soon as anyone takes notes in Hugo, it goes into a Slack channel. So others in the team get that get that exposure to the conversations that are already happening. So it's not this big surprise that's dropped on the success team. They know what's coming down the pipe. They know the sorts of conversations that are happening. They're across the development of these deals. Again, making a much more seamless handover when it's time for them to pick up.
Exactly. And also creating a template, right? Like with Hugo, and having all the whole thing that Osher would need, or the CS team would need, right there within Hugo, and pushing that to the CRM, pushing it to Slack, so that Osher's notified and has all the information that he needs for his kickoff call.
Yeah, actually, it's a perfect segue, because I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can improve your handoff process. And I think that was one of the first things I wanted to touch on, is having a standardized internal handoff meeting. And so we talked a little bit about this, but CS and sales should agree on what's needed in order to launch an account, and also what is like an onboarded customer. Having a definition and a shared definition of what that is really, really important. And when you have a formalized meeting template, this makes sure that everyone's aligned and the transition is smooth. If you're doing it haphazardly or like ad hoc syncs on a deal that's closed and a handoff, it can be a little bit messy and things can fall through the cracks. So what's really important, and things that we've seen really effective sort of processes here, is one, including the basic information, things that you have in your CRM and your customer info, like objectives, red flags, things like that. Some of the tech stack that they're using, implementation needs, all those sort of important basic information. But then also adding in some other things on top of that. So some additional context, like what's the sentiment like? Has there been any issues that we need to go through together? Very clear sort of important information, but having that standardized process makes the meeting run more efficiently. And also, again, alignment. We've talked a lot about this, but having that alignment as well when there's a standardized set process. And lastly, just the actions, nothing falling through the cracks. We know exactly how we run our meetings. And once you've done this a couple of times and you run through the process a few times, you'll have better meetings, more effective meetings, and a much smoother handoff process.
Absolutely. And that expectation setting, whether it be internally or externally with the customer, is incredibly important, right? They want to know how often and when they're going to be meeting with their CSM to oftentimes onboard hundreds of folks in the company who may not have even interacted with the tool or the platform. And so having those expectations set, and so they know exactly when you're going to be meeting with them, and they can get you the information that you need as the customer success person is incredibly important to make sure it goes successfully, so that you can add the value, so that we do enable the whole team and that we keep the customer for years to come, and we have this reoccurring revenue stream, right? So those are really important pieces that are obviously like incredibly important to a SaaS platform such as Hugo that's product led. And so yeah, it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, you're reading my mind, because the other thing that I wanted to talk about was actually preparing and aligning with the customer or the prospect before the call. So in this case, it's a customer if it's a handoff. But what's interesting from our user research, what we see, teams and people that actually, one, just prepare for meetings, obviously have more better meetings and more efficient meetings, right? But if you go a step further and you actually involve the guest or the attendee, and in this case, the customer, it can really do some awesome things and have some really high impact on your sales and success process. So we see this in a few different ways as well. but some quick tips and tactics here. Sharing the proposed agenda before the meeting with the option to add or edit or change is really, really helpful. And I'll talk a little bit about it. Or another one is like a checklist of what to bring or prepare to the meeting. Having that upfront preparation and sort of transparency with the customer, with the client, with the prospect, it creates higher morale, more sort of efficiency as well, and really shows the sort of professionalism that you're bringing to the table, and creates like a really, really helpful way to kick off like a customer onboarding session. So I would highly recommend doing not just the internal prep, but also the external prep, exposing that to the prospect or to the customer in this case, and leaving your customers feeling really aligned, really valued, and really stimulated from the get-go.
Yeah, that makes me reminds me actually, Osher, of like deals that we've worked on where the more that we can get them to invest and the more that we can get them to interact, the more enabled they become. So it's actually, sometimes I think salespeople, especially and CS folks as well, they're like, okay, let's just make this as easy as possible for them, which is great. Like we want to add value, we want to make it easy. We also want to get them to engage early on. And I think exactly what you said, creating that checklist and getting them to engage as early as even before the kickoff call, we've seen in our experience that those can be better enabled and more successful companies with the product. So not a bad idea.
Another tip that I wanted to share with everyone and with our listeners is around context. And I sort of call this context is key, right, for effective transitions and handoffs. So nothing is more frustrating for a customer to repeat what they had to say during a sales cycle, right? Or what they've discussed in the past. It's a really big no-no. I'm sure everyone can attest to it or appreciate or understand, like having to repeat things is not a nice experience. And from a sales perspective, it can majorly impact the start of a customer relationship. When I say sales perspective, I mean just in the whole organization and team. And so what's really important is that we know that you need to take notes, obviously, and store that information, retain that, but most importantly, recall it. That's like the really key bit here. It's easy to take notes, but in order to recall that to CS and to the other parts of the organization before the kickoff call is hugely, hugely important. We don't want to have to ask the same sort of questions again, do discovery calls again, miss key information for implementations and technical things that we need to know about. So having that retained and recalled is super, super important.
I think as well, the customization of your success flows depends on having that context, right? So if I'm a CSM who takes an account and I'm learning these things on the fly, there's only so much I can personalize the experience. If I've got a really good understanding of the pain points that brought you to the product, what helped the deal close, the stack you're using, the politics and dynamics of the organization, I'm going to head straight into a killer onboarding session or whatever the first touch may be. So much easier to do your job and customers way happier too. For context, one of the reasons in our view why this doesn't happen all the time, why it is the norm that customer success in their handoff jumps in and redoes half the sales folks' work from the beginning of the sales cycle, is because we don't have centralization of these customer insights. You might have sales living in the CRM, success living across a bunch of different tools, and everyone else in the business, obviously, not having access to even those places. So when I want to understand everything about a customer, I literally have to start digging around through tools and tapping everyone on the shoulder. Centralized meeting productivity and having a central place for meeting notes is obviously what we do at Hugo. The shameless plug there makes sense in this context because being able to take notes connected to your calendar means that all of the notes, all of the meeting preparation, all the actions, all the tasks, everything relates to that prospect, now customer, is stored in one spot. That allows you, right, to go and have everything you need as the CSM from all the previous interactions, even without that formal handover. So we highly recommend that, obviously, as a nice solution here that's worth checking out. And to Ash's point, the recall piece is super easy because automatically when I jump into my meeting, I've got all of this information, all of this knowledge, all of these tasks, actions, and so on, and everything else brought up right in front of me. So Hugo is a great solution for handover because the power of Hugo is obviously across the organization.
Yeah, and on that, what was interesting, talking to a recent team that we just onboarded, one of their challenges was around they were massively growing and scaling and hiring a lot of new people with lots of different experience levels within the organization, and also onboarding a lot of customers at the same time. And information was sort of in a bunch of Slack threads in a bunch of different places, in CRM, as you mentioned, and other docs as well. So one of the tips that I wanted to share too is around once you have that sort of centralization and accessibility, also like building a bit more structure, right? We kind of talked a little bit about it too, but one of the tips that I wanted to share is like having some structured forms, structured checklists, structured templates that you use for meetings, because even if you do have it centralized, it can still be hard to glean insights and information for your handoff or for the stuff that you need. So I would really recommend thinking about, being thoughtful about the process and the structure and how you're taking notes, and also how you're surfacing them as well, to make it really easy. You don't have to dig all the time. So that would be my other tip there. Once you've sort of centralized things, also think about the structure and building a process around that.
I might add a shameless plug as well with Hugo. I mean, obviously we have templates, right? And we have a template library, and we have some incredible templates already there for the CS handoff and from exactly what we're doing. So if you're not already using Hugo and you're interested, you should go check it out. Go check out the library and see what you think. But I think, Osher, I completely agree. Like, we already have these concepts of repositories of information for the sales cycle, right? They live in the CRM, but it's incredibly hard to surface that data if it's not structured. And what Hugo does, I think the magic and the beauty of Hugo is that you create that structure, that process within the templates, within the docs, and it's a total game changer, right? You can dig through, and I'm sure you've done it in your career, right? Through the notes of Salesforce and like piecing together this picture where when you can have it already structured exactly how you want to receive it or work with the sales department, it's just such a game changer. And it's why Hugo especially is like so useful for the customer success role and the sales role, right? And every role in the company, but you guys know, like, as well as I do, like we really do see it being effective in those two roles. And so, yeah, go to the library and Hugo Templates and check out some of the relevant templates to you guys, to whoever's viewing this. And I think it's a great place to get started.
Yeah. Conscious of time, we've covered a ton, some war stories and some more formal tips. So I might just leave with one thought that I heard at a customer success conference that I was speaking at. Imagine if you've got one goal through all of this. If you were to delete your email signatures as your account executive, as your customer success manager, and whatever other role you play in this process, the customer shouldn't know when you've handed off, right? They may be building relationships with different people at different times in their relationship, but they should not know at which point you're no longer the responsibility of sales and at which point you're the responsibility of customer success. That's a seamless handoff where my relationship with the organization is developing as I've got different needs, but I can't see the ka-ching of the commission being triggered in one sense before I start talking to the next person who's focused on activation and retention and so on. So I think that's the big takeaway there. Seamless handoffs will pay off now and obviously well into the future. Sales is now an ongoing process. Customer success doesn't just get enlivened once a deal's closed. And hopefully through those ways of thinking, and obviously encouraging you to check out Hugo too. This is a key use case for us that we've been very focused on from a product standpoint. Hopefully we can help you create more customer advocates and all while reducing churn. So with all that in mind, we appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully you've got something to take away to go and help the way you think about sales and customer success in your organization. Thanks so much for joining us, Britt. Thanks so much for joining us, Asher. Great hearing about these things from your perspectives in sales and customer success, respectively. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. We'll see you next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.